How can we think about buying happiness in retirement?
What we see with people who buy a car to join a car club is that it does provide enduring happiness because they've paired that consumption with the number one predictor of happiness, which is good relationships.
What are the other things that can get in the way? Maybe the things that we're not thinking about for someone who's 60, going to retire in the next 2 years.
You sort of got to brainstorm the worst that could happen, and then you work with your advisor to take that off the table.
Any ideas of people who have done it the right way, or what did they start to do?
Buying your time back, buying your freedom back. If there's something you just dread doing and you have the money to do it, you should outsource it. We're all sort of in a hurry to leave work behind, but we see that work does a great deal to sort of buttress our well-being. And if we're not really planful and thoughtful in retirement, we can find ourselves there, even if we've saved well.
That's a lot right there. That's probably a book in itself. If you are close to retirement or already retired, this conversation is going to help you because it's with New York Times bestselling author, Dr. Daniel Crosby. I recently read his book, The Soul of Wealth, and I saw so many practical ideas and ways to make retirement the best stage of life yet. So if you end up liking this conversation, let me know by clicking the like button or by leaving a comment so that I know that you like it. Now, let's get into the interview. Welcome, Daniel Crosby, Dr. Daniel Crosby. Thanks for being here. We're going to be talking about this book, The Soul of Wealth, and how it is helping, specifically how it can help retirees. It's full of practical advice, but just wanted to say welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dave. It's great to be with you.
So let's get into it. If you don't mind, I took a bunch of notes. I highlighted a bunch of things and have a bunch of sticky notes in here. There's something I wanted to ask you about, and it was actually a title to one of the chapters, which is called Your Most Important Financial Decision is Not Financial at All. So when we're helping retirees or pre-retirees to retire, it has a lot to do with money. Is that true when we're talking about the decision to retire?
Well, so it's interesting because since money touches every part of our lives, effectively every decision is a financial decision, not just the overtly financial decisions, right? And in the book, I give the example of, choosing who you marry. I mean, choosing the right person to marry is one of the most material financial decisions you would ever make, and yet people don't conceptualize it as that. And what's fascinating is when you look at the data on people who get help, people who work with an advisor, they're better prepared for an emergency. They are less likely to get divorced. They have higher levels of marital communication. They have higher global levels of happiness. And that's because every single decision you make is effectively a financial decision, even the ones that don't feel like money. So when it comes to retirement, I think a lot of times we're very focused on the number, right? Like how can we get to the number? But the research is really staggering about how sort of disconnected people are in retirement, how lonely they are, how depressed in many cases. And that's because we haven't addressed, sort of these non-financial aspects of retirement, because everything is and everything isn't a financial decision.
Yeah. Okay. So now thinking about the non-financial things, what are the other things that can get in the way? Maybe the things that we're not thinking about for someone who's 60, going to retire in the next 2 years, and maybe they've got the money stuff figured out. What are the other things they should be that catches them off guard? And then what's some practical ideas or tips? It could be from the book, or just, I know you've got a wealth of knowledge from all the other books you've written.
Yeah. So in the first chapter, I think the first chapter has one of the best frameworks for thinking about life holistically. And it's called the PERMA model. This is from work done by Dr. Martin Seligman from Penn, this seminal work on positive psychology. So he studied what makes life worth living, what leads to wellness and flourishing, and he found that there were 5 things. And, the acronym is PERMA. So the first of these is positive experiences, positive emotions. This is just fun, right? Just fun stuff. And we usually do a good job of anticipating and preparing for that in retirement because we think, I want to golf, like I want to hang with the grandkids, I want to go on vacations, I want to go on a cruise with my spouse. Money does an excellent job of sort of meeting the P, that positive emotions, the positive experiences. The second E for a good life is engagement. This is deep, meaningful work. the kind of work that puts you in a flow state, which is this, what psychologists call this sort of moment of pure absorption in a task. You're losing track of time because you're so engrossed in a task. Work is good at that. Work provides us with engagement. Now, it doesn't have to be work. Like, it doesn't have to be paid work. Like, I get that from playing guitar or writing or, other sort of avocational interests. But not everyone is thinking about, how am I going to work hard in retirement? And that is indeed a big part of what makes us happy. The R in PERMA is the most critical. And this is the one that tends to be most absent, especially among men in retirement. And the R is for relationships. Say what you will about work. There's lots to dislike, but it brings us close to people. We have usually strong relationships at work, and we meet nice people, and we benefit from saying, hey, how was your weekend? And stopping at the water cooler to talk about the game. So work provides, especially for men who tend to have weaker social networks outside of work, work provides sort of a just add water relational network that's important for people's happiness. And many times, again, especially men, don't think of, how am I going to connect with people in a post-retirement world, and how am I just not going to bug my spouse all the time, who's out, living their life. The M is for meaning. This is working for something bigger than money, bigger than self. This is religion, spirituality, volunteerism, service, philanthropy. Just working for something that's bigger than a dollar and bigger than you. And again, work often provides us with this. We're part of a team. We have sort of a corporate mission, and that tends to dissolve in retirement if we're not careful. And then the A is for advancement or achievement. We want to be better today than we were yesterday. We want to be growing. We want to be learning. Again, work does a very good job of this. There's promotions, there's continuing education. It's all very structured and baked into work that tends to be less rigorous. So we're all sort of in a hurry to leave work behind, but we see that work does a great deal to sort of buttress our well-being. And if we're not really planful and thoughtful in retirement, we can find ourselves there, even if we've saved well, with enough money to have a good time, but sort of missing the other four ingredients.
Wow, that's a lot right there. That's probably a book in itself, or you probably know
Definitely.
of a book.
There's lots of books about this, yeah.
So when it comes to accomplishment, that is progress, you say? That's better than you were yesterday type thinking, right. And that's just a thing that humans need to do, and that stops a lot of times when we're done with the career.
Yeah.
What's like an example or practical, any ideas of people who have done it the right way, or what did they start to do, or what filled that accomplishment for others?
So, it could be anything, it could be, what's the hobby that you wanted to learn that you weren't able to because perhaps you were in the thick of raising children and working a 9 to 5. I think, 80-something% of the world wants to write a book, and, a vanishingly small number of people actually do. So, writing a book is a perfect example. Learning to play an instrument, getting in shape. There's a million things, but it takes intentionality. Finding that thing that maybe work prevented you from doing, but going after it in a systemic way, getting a coach, monitoring your progress daily, and watching yourself grow in practical ways.
I like that. It kind of reminds me of I think there's another chapter called, it's around strengths, focusing on your strengths, I think is the title of the chapter. How can we, when we're thinking about accomplishment and doing more of what we're good at, how can people, okay, so if I've got a career, I kind of understand what my strengths are, what I'm good at, what I'm paid to do. It's easier to think that way. How can we take the strengths from the career world and then apply it to no more career? I don't know if that's coming across. Is that making sense, where it's like strengths and accomplishment, combining those two, it seems somewhat related. Any ideas there for how to find your strength?
So I think a lot of times we think about our strengths in overly specific things, because the workforce is one of specialization. In the modern economy, we're required to deeply specialize. And people laugh when I tell them what my job is, right? I'm the chief behavioral officer at a financial technology company, and they're like, "Whoa, that is incredibly specific." Like you study emotion and money all day, right? And yes, in some respects that is incredibly specific. But if you take a step back, my work is about a few things, and I'll just use myself as an easy example.
Mm-hmm.
I have to take complex subjects and simplify them for an audience that isn't expert at them, right? I could apply that to 1,000 different things. I could take that same skill set in retirement and go teach financial empowerment and financial literacy courses to, at a church. I could help people who are recently widowed to understand money. And there's a million things you could do with that sort of intersect with your interests. So to stop thinking of our skills in the narrow sense and to start thinking of them in the broader sense. Like, okay, you've done this, you've built a career on this, likely in a very sort of specialized way, but take a step back. What's the broader application? And then pair it with one of those 5 facets of a meaningful life. How could you use it to develop a relationship, right? How could you use it to bring some meaning into your life? I think that's where it gets really good.
Yeah. That's really great. I wanted to switch topics to just the constant bombardment that we get from news and updates and everything seeming so urgent every day. And we know that the news's job is to deliver our eyeballs to their advertisers. But, I still get hooked. We all still get hooked on page 124 of your book. Hopefully you got a copy. You listed a few mental models to kind of filter the signal from the noise to see like, what should we really be paying attention to? It was a few questions. Can we walk through those and try to maybe take some notes? I mean, when I'm looking down, by the way, I'm taking notes. Can we walk through those and help us filter the signal from the noise?
Yeah. So just a word about signal and noise to begin with. I think, you said it really well, which is I think the first thing we have to understand is we have to understand these folks' motivation. And in a previous book, I tell a story that I'll retell here really quickly. I was on 6 years ago when I was promoting my last book. I was asked to be on I won't name them, but a large cable financial news program, right? I was wearing, I look like a shrink, which I am, right? I was wearing tweed and I had a bow tie on and I had, like my glasses on, like tortoiseshell glasses. And you have this little earpiece in, and the producer is counting me down. You can hear what's going on in the program, but you've got a producer in your ear telling you that you're about to be on, and she's counting me down 5, 4, 3, 2. And she goes, 5, 4, 3, 2, give me something good, don't be a nerd. And then
That's impossible for you. Okay.
No, it is impossible for me not to be a nerd. Nice try, lady. But no, it is impossible for me. But, that is how the sausage gets made. If she really had her folks' best interests at heart, the viewer's best interests at heart, she would have said, please keep this scientific, evidence-based, and to benefit as many people as possible. But she said, like, give me, effectively give me something spicy. Don't be overly academic. And that is how the sausage gets made, right? That is what they're doing. They're selling negativity by and large. They're trying to get as many ears and eyeballs on the page as possible. So what do we do? First of all, we understand that that's how things get done. So the first thing I have on that page 124 is, do I have reason to believe the accuracy of this information? So this is not in the book, but I was laughing the other day. I was watching, again, an unnamed news channel pre-election, and they had a wrestler, like a professional WWE wrestler on, giving his opinion about what was going to happen in the election. And I was just like, why, like, what in the world qualifies this person to opine on this? Like, this guy wears tights for a living and, clotheslines people in a scripted way even. So, I think a lot of times we conflate wealth or fame or, a known name with accuracy of giving forecasts, and that's certainly not the case. The second thing is, what's the motivation? That goes back to the story I talked about earlier. A lot of times when there's negativity or melodrama or something like that, the motivation is to sell a course, to sell a product, to get ratings. It is not your financial best interest. The next one I really like, and I actually tell advisors to do this. The next one is, will I care about this in 5 years? I encourage advisors to, pick a day, preferably a really scary day. So I mean, March of 2020 gave us plenty of those, right? So go back to March or April of 2020, grab a newspaper, get the headlines, laminate that thing, and when clients come in scared about something, right? Say, yeah, the news is scary. Look here, it says, whatever, world economy in free fall. You're right, things are scary. And then go, yeah, this is from 5 years ago. Like how are you doing now? Are you still worried about this?
Yeah.
And it gives such perspective, right? I mean, the world is always climbing a wall of worry. And if you had bailed on the capital markets 5 years ago, when things legitimately looked the worst they have ever looked in my lifetime, right? You would have left so much money on the table. It's staggering. And so just understand that worry is perpetual. There has always been crime. There has always been disease. There has always been war. But the arc of human history and human goodness is up and to the right, and human ingenuity, right? We are getting better. We're getting kinder all the time, and the world is getting better. One of the reasons I wrote this book is when this country was founded, late 1700s, when this country was founded, 85% of the world was living on $2 or what is today $2 or less a day. And today that number is 9%, right? We have gone from 85% global poverty to 9% in 200 and something years. That is incredible. We have never been wealthier. We have never been better off. And yet people aren't always using that wealth and that abundance in ways that make their lives better. And so, you're probably not going to care about these things in 5 years. And then lastly, does this matter, for my finances or for what matters to me? We get a correction, right? You get a 10% or better dip every year on average. You get a 20% or better dip every 5 years. You get a really nasty bear market every 7 or 8 to 10 years, right? And it doesn't really matter in the long run. So many of these bumps and bruises along the way, I liken it to raising teenagers, right? If you look at every little dust up, if you look at every little side eye or every little sneer, you'd be kind of sad. But are they headed in the right direction, right? You can't focus on every little dust up. You have to look at the direction, and the direction's good.
Yeah. That's like picking your battles.
Yeah.
My wife reminds me of that often. 8-year-old boy and picking the battles wisely.
Yeah.
But there was a lot in what you had just said. You mentioned, we talked about worry and just, again, all the stuff coming at us. And in thinking about worst case scenario, there's 2 spots where I think you mentioned worst case scenario in the book, maybe more, but there's 2 chapters. One's called Take the Worst Case Off the Table. And then it seemed like kind of an opposing view, which was a little bit later, which is called Imagining the Worst Can Be for the Best. So to me, that sounds opposing. I know there's a whole chapter on each one of those, but are those opposed? What is that? Why did you write both of those so close to each other?
Yeah, they actually go together nicely. I mean, I can understand how they feel opposing, but they go together nicely. The first one is what the Stoics called the premeditation of evils, and what behavioral psychologists like myself call a pre-mortem. So it's effectively imagining the worst thing that could happen. And I mean, you even see my bracelet here. I got my bracelet that my daughter made me that says Memento Mori, which is, basically remember that you're going to die. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the Roman soldiers, they would do this after a big conquest. They would parade them around the Colosseum, and they would have them in these chariots, and they would have a slave in the back of the chariot crouched down who would periodically get up and whisper in their ear, memento mori, like effectively, remember you're just a man, remember you're going to die. And so what I ask folks to do in that chapter is to just say, hey, look at my financial life, look at my life or my financial life. If I'm sitting here 10 years hence, if I'm sitting here 10 years from now and things have gone to hell, right? Things didn't go my way. What is the likely cause of that, right? If I'm sitting here with Dave and I'm across the desk from him and I'm like, no, it's a mess, right? I'm unhappy, I'm fat, my finances are a mess, like whatever a mess looks like, right? What is the reason? For a lot of people, it's going to be not taking adequate risk, taking too much risk, not having enough insurance, not following your dreams, not spending enough time with your kids, kind of depending on what you're trying to optimize for. But to say, like, let's just take a simple example, right? Someone who's, a small business owner doing well, but maybe doesn't have key man insurance, maybe doesn't have a contingency plan, doesn't have a succession plan. You say, hey, okay, if we're sitting here 10 years from now and things have gone poorly, like what happened? Well, was it that I didn't take care of my health? Was it that I didn't have insurance? Maybe it's some combination of those things. And once you've anticipated it, then you can take it off the table, right? Then you can take it off the table and go, okay, well, let's get that insurance. Titrate that risk. Let's spend that time with the kids. And I give the example of Hyundai. Hyundai did something absolutely brilliant in the great financial crisis. Nobody's buying cars, right? So unemployment in the US in the GFC was like 9%. But the flip side of that is employment was 91%. So, 91% of people have jobs that are looking for jobs. And yet effectively 0% of people are buying cars because 100% of people are worried about unemployment. Mm-hmm. Even the 91% who were employed were worried about the specter of unemployment. And so what Hyundai did was they said, hey, if you buy a Hyundai and you lose your job, we take it back, no questions asked, you get a full refund, right? So we have taken this bad dream you're having, it's done. We handled it. And they had their best quarter ever. They outkicked all their competitors. And so the financial equivalent of that is like, what's your fear, right? A big bad bear market, okay? Well, how long does a bear market last on average? Well, about 19 months. Okay, let's set aside 2 years of cash. And yes, if and when a bear market arrives, and it will, right? If and when a bear market arrives, we got 2 years of cash and it's all to the good because here we are. We knew it was going to happen. We were ready for that. And now I got 2 years cash and now I can take appropriate risk and live my life with the remainder of my assets. So you got to anticipate those evils to prepare for them. So I don't think it's all that contradictory. You've got to you sort of got to brainstorm the worst that could happen, and then you work with your advisor to take that off the table.
I love it. Yeah, it's very simple, but what we do with clients is just, you've heard it before, but just the bucket strategy. Think about the three in terms of length of time of income. Again, everyone who's coming to us is thinking about taking withdrawals and just number of years of safety, in this, you've got 2 years worth, and then you've got 5 years worth, and then longer term stuff. But that's great. Can you help me understand how to buy happiness? There's a few, you touched on it earlier, but there's a few chapters about money kind of buying happiness or how to spend it the right way. Not a lot, but it's great because sometimes people will retire, clients will retire, and they've got the money to do something. Sometimes it's around a car, that they've always wanted and they never had before, but now it doesn't impact their plan much and they do it. And the common thing that we hear, and this was actually one of the videos I told you about, advice to 50-year-olds, was 6 months in or so, unless they're car enthusiasts, 6 months in, it's like, it's the car's fine. I probably would have been okay if I rented it for a couple weeks and got my fill. But what are other ways? How can we think about buying happiness in retirement?
So the car example is fantastic. I talk about that specifically in the book. Yeah, sure enough, the research says a car is a common sort of stretch goal for folks. So you hit it big, you buy the Porsche or whatever. But one of these things that is a blessing and a curse about humankind is that we quickly habituate to our circumstances. So the good news is we're capable of a lot more pain than we typically realize. When people say, well, if I ever lost so and so, or if I ever went bankrupt, or if XYZ bad thing ever happened to me, that would be it for me. Like I couldn't do it. Well, yes, you can, right? Like we're able, we're stronger than we realize. We're more powerful. We're able to deal with sort of a broader swath of life's circumstances than we sort of typically realize. The flip side of that is we do the same thing with abundance. We go, oh man, if I had that Porsche, I would just be, every day would be a daydream. And, I would just skip to work and everything would be perfect. Well, you kind of just get used to it. When I tell the story when my wife and I bought this house nine years ago, it's in a beautiful neighborhood. It's a nice home. And I mean, the first time I saw it, it was a significant upgrade from where we were living at the time. And I called her and I was like, you are not going to believe this place. Like you're gonna die. Because I was searching it out before. I was a state away doing some home searching. And I'm like, when you see this place, you're gonna freak out. Well, I don't freak out anymore. Like it's just where I throw my dirty socks, right? I mean, it's still the same house. I just got used to it. And so that's kind of the bad news. But what we see with people who buy a car to join a car club is that it does provide enduring happiness because they've paired that consumption with the number one predictor of happiness, which is good relationships.
Cool.
And so now when you join, the Porsche Club of North Atlanta and you have somewhere to go on Saturdays and you pop your hood with your buddies and you look at your engines and you drink your coffee and you plan trips together, that brings an immense amount of happiness. So one thing that we can do is pair our spending with elements of that PERMA model that we talked about earlier that we know bring happiness, right? So if a big spend facilitates a relational connection, it's probably fine, like if you've got the money for it. And it probably will bring you enduring happiness. If you buy the Porsche to stunt on your neighbor, it will not, right?
Yeah. Well, would you say don't relate it to the P, positive emotion, because that's just the never-ending loop, right? The hedonic treadmill. Like car, because it fits the PERMA model, because it's a P, positive emotion. I would say don't do that, right? If you're looking for meaning.
It's a great question because for a time it will scratch that itch, right? That first few weeks of driving that car, your neighbors are impressed, your kids think you're cool, your spouse hugs you a little tighter, like you got the wind blowing through your hair. Yeah, it's good for a couple of weeks, but that brings me to another one, is to buy novelty. We are quickly habituated to hedonism, so hedonic pleasures work best when they're novel and when they're kind of splurges, right? When something is a splurge, it hits harder. Going to Japan for the first time, that's awesome because it's new sights, new sounds. It's just novel everything, right? That's why travel tends to buy a lot of happiness because it's novel. So PERMA, the P in PERMA, yeah, those, you can buy a lot of novelty though for the cost of a car, right? I mean, if a fancy car costs $100,000, you could do better than that in terms of buying that P. Other stuff, giving money away. People dramatically misapprehend the happiness that philanthropy and being charitable and being generous gives. Buying novelty, buying time with people you love, getting out of work you hate is another one. Sort of buying your time back, buying your freedom back. If there's something you just dread doing and you have the money to do it, you should outsource it. And people are really loath to do that. But some of the best money I spend every year is getting a high school kid to cut my yard. And, knock on wood, that will continue in perpetuity. I hope. I live in the South. I never want to mow my yard again. Like, it's so hot.
Is that high school kid your kid or something?
No way. No. But my kids have to cut the yard sometimes, and that's for free. That's part of the cost of doing business at the Crosby household.
Yeah. That's great. I love that last part. Let's end it on that because I know you gotta go pretty soon. But this book I would definitely recommend, The Soul of Wealth, and it's all about money and meaning, and that's so crucial as we're getting into retirement years and making sure that we have that meaning and fulfillment. So thanks for writing this book. Thanks for talking about it and getting specific on some of these pages. It means a lot.
Thanks for sharing your platform with me.